Evening from New York, I'm Joy Reid in for Chris Hayes. Well, it's been nearly a day since a terrorist attack in which a gunman massacred 49 men, women, and children in 2 New Zealand mosques. A manifesto that appears to have been posted online by the shooter includes anti-Muslim rhetoric and references the President of the United States in a kind of mock quiz, reading, quote, "Are you a supporter of Donald Trump? As a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose? Sure." Trump was asked about the spread of white nationalism at a White House event earlier today.
You see today white nationalism as a rising threat around the world.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems. I guess if you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's a case. I don't know enough about it yet. They're just learning about the person and the people involved. But it's certainly a terrible thing, terrible thing.
Trump did not publicly comment on the attack for 11 hours until posting on Twitter, quote, "My warmest sympathy and best wishes go out to the people of New Zealand after the horrible massacre in the mosques. 49 innocent people have so senselessly died, with so many more seriously injured. The U.S. stands by New Zealand for anything we can do. God bless us all." Just 20 minutes later, Trump followed with a tweet encouraging Jewish people to leave the Democratic Party, before launching into a Twitter rant accusing the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the CIA of working to spy on him and, quote, "take him out." Trump's tirade about the subject he clearly preferred to focus on included a litany of his greatest hits, claiming zero crimes when the special counsel was appointed, saying there should be no Mueller report, and ending with, "This should never happen to a president again!" exclamation point. Speaking earlier, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said that when Trump asked what he could do to help, she told him sympathy and love for all Muslim communities. And she said that Trump acknowledged and agreed, which is kind of surprising considering everything Donald Trump has said about Muslims in the past.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. Yes, we have to look at mosques. We have no choice. We have to see what's happening because something is happening in there.
Problem in this country, it's called Muslims. We know our current president is one. Right. You know he's not even an American.
We need this
birth
question.
certificates,
This is the
man.
first question.
But anyway, we have training camps growing where they want to kill us. Mm-hmm. That's my question. When can we get rid of it?
We're going to be looking at a lot of different things. And, you know, a lot of people are saying that, and a lot of people are saying that bad things are happening out there. We're going to be looking at that and plenty of other things.
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred.
A study by the Anti-Defamation League going back to 1970 found that in the U.S., 73.3% of all extremist-related fatalities can be linked to domestic right-wing extremists, while 23.4% can be attributed to Islamic extremists. Donald Trump's derogatory comments about Muslims and his refusal to condemn white supremacy have undermined America's moral authority when events like what happened in New Zealand take place. There are more than a dozen Democrats currently vying to replace Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And one question for each of them will be how, and frankly, if a new president can get that authority back. Joining me now is one of those candidates, Julian Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama. Secretary Castro, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you, Joy.
So I want to play for you what the Director of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Executive Director, Mihwad Awad, said the following about Donald Trump. Take a listen.
It is no secret that Mr. Trump has campaigned on white supremacist ideology, on division and fear, and now we see that he was able to normalize Islamophobia and to give legitimacy to those who fear Muslims and fear immigrants. So it comes back to him, and we tell him that your words matter and your policies matter. And if he would like to be the leader of the free world, he has to change his policies. And he has to reset the tone by recommitting himself to unity, equality, not only in words, but also in policies. So he has a lot to do, and we hope that he will take the first step by condemning this as a white supremacist attack.
Secretary Castro, when the president of the United States is spoken about that way by an American Muslim leader in the wake of an attack like what happened in New Zealand, how does the United States get back its moral authority to be able to respond in a profound way when something like what happens in New Zealand takes place?
Well, unfortunately, I think that, as many have said, this president has lost his moral authority in different ways. He lost it around Charlottesville when he said that they were very fine people. Those neo-Nazis that were marching in the streets, shouting racial epithets. And we can always hope that the president is going to realize the error of his ways or be pressured into taking, a different posture or coming at this differently and trying to unify the country and instead of fanning the flames of division, try and build unity in this country and how people view Muslims and Islam. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we've seen who Donald Trump is. That's one of the reasons that we need new leadership. In the meantime, I do think that everybody else, all of us who recognize that we should try and build unity, who recognize that that the acts of a few people don't speak for either all white people or any other group when they commit terrorist acts, and who certainly recognize, differently from Donald Trump, that Islam does not hate Americans or the United States. It's up to us to help rebuild that moral authority in America, to speak out from our positions of leadership and authority, in our houses of worship, what we teach in schools, all of us as mothers and fathers, and what we teach our children. We have to rebuild that up from the ground because the president's leadership is lacking here. It's entirely missing, and we can't count on Donald Trump to do that. It's just not within him.
But, Secretary Castro, Donald Trump is one person, but he was elected by lots and lots of people. He has a lot of very strident support behind him. He has a party that is 100% unified behind him, as we just saw. Only 12 managed to walk away from him, even in the declaration of a national emergency, based on this idea of, a horde coming at the southern border. If you are sworn in as president in January of 2021, what do you tell the world when you go abroad? What story do you then tell about us as a country that changes the current view?
Well, I would tell the story of the way that after the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, that there were Muslim Americans who comforted Jewish Americans who had been harmed, whose family members had been killed, a community that had been completely shaken, and that today there were Jewish Americans that were comforting Muslim Americans and people of all different backgrounds in this country that showed the character of our nation. That character is not reflected by Donald Trump. So all we have to do is show them the character of this country. And I think once we have new leadership, we are going to have a president with new moral authority and the ability to go to other countries and say that it's a new day in the United States and that we're here to build alliances and believe in others and not to tear those things down.
Secretary Julian Castro, candidate for president, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you. And joining me now are Adam Serwer, staff writer at The Atlantic. His latest piece is entitled White Nationalism's Deep American Roots. Also, Mehdi Hasan, columnist and senior contributor at The Intercept and host of the Deconstructed podcast. He's also a presenter on Al Jazeera English's Upfront. Thank you both for being here. Adam, I'm going to start with you. You have a harrowing, brilliant piece, I have to say, in The Atlantic.
Thank you.
That is, I think, jarring for even people who think we got a pretty decent American history education, because you go right in and you talk about some of the white nationalist seeds of even that inspired even the Nazi ideology in Germany. Is that to say that this ideology is embedded in a way that is inextricable from American history?
Well, I think it's one side of an argument that we've been having as Americans since the country was founded. Is this a country that is fundamentally a white and Christian country? And that is just the fundamental part of it, of its identity, without which it's no longer really America? Or is America a place where anybody can be American, anybody of any race, creed, or color? And I think we've been having that argument for pretty much since the country was founded, and I think we're going to continue to have it. What I was trying to do with this essay was contextualize the fact that we've been having this argument for such a long time, that Trump is not necessarily anything new. In fact, 100 years ago, we were having a very similar political conversation, and in some ways was much more grim.
And, Mehdi, whatever one thinks about Donald Trump or, his political ideology, it is jarring to hear the President of the United States' name kind of dropped in a insane manifesto by somebody who commits an act like this. And I wonder just how you contextualize this, even for American Muslims who are looking across at New Zealand and feeling, afraid even here.
Definitely feeling afraid and feeling depressed and feeling worried. And you're right to mention the President of the United States. It isn't normal for him to be mentioned in a manifesto, for the President to be mentioned in the manifesto of a mass shooter as some kind of inspiration or sharing a common purpose. But of course, this guy in New Zealand wasn't the first to do that. I wrote a piece a few months ago after the Pittsburgh synagogue, after the Cesar Sayok, the guy with the pipe bombs who was arrested, and just before the Pittsburgh shooting, about the number of people who have been arrested in the US. There were guys in Minnesota. There have been people. There was a guy in Quebec City, Joy. Do you remember in January 2017, 6 Muslims gunned down by Canadian white nationalists shortly after Trump's inauguration, who was inspired by Trump as well, he said, when he was interviewed by police. There are many, many cases out there. This is not a one-off, and this is not new. And Trump is an enabler of white nationalism. He is the world's most prominent Islamophobe right now. If we talk about Islamophobia, the world's most prominent Islamophobe sits in the White House. So when we see an Islamophobic mass murder in New Zealand, of course we're going to talk about the President's record. I'm glad you played that video at the start of all the things he said. I mean, some of the things he said, many more than that. So it is deeply depressing. I say this as the father of 2 Muslim American kids. How do you talk to them about the fact that their president basically doesn't give a damn about their safety or security, has been inciting this hatred? And when he's asked in the White House today, does he think it's on the rise? He said, no, it's just a small group of people. Of course, because they're his people.
Yeah, and Adam, as I said to the secretary, Donald Trump is one man. There's a whole infrastructure supporting the presidency, and at the moment, that infrastructure obviously includes, in our government, the courts. This ban on travelers that was originally even sold by Donald Trump as a Muslim ban ultimately got upheld. There are policies in place that have got to be jarring for American Muslims, even as they receive the sympathy of so many people around the country. Do we have to have a deeper conversation just about Americans' ability to empathize with our Muslim brothers and sisters, period?
Well, I mean, I think politically the country pretty strongly rejected Donald Trump's politics, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim politics in the midterms. So I don't know that a conversation is going to do it. I think this is really a question. Again, it's a struggle about who America is going to be. And when you look at stuff like the Muslim ban, I mean, that in particular is extraordinary because the Supreme Court essentially gave Donald Trump a roadmap for implementing discriminatory policy. They said, look, as long as you leave the really obvious language out of it, we'll be okay with it. As long as you don't say Muslim in the ban, it's fine. So I think, we're headed for, a lot more bumps in the road beyond just this.
And Mehdi, there's a global thing that's happening around the movement of human beings, around people, that's partly driven by war, by climate change, by violence, and a lot of it does center on the Muslim world. Yeah. You look at a safe country like New Zealand, they don't have our gun issues, they don't have the kind of gun violence that we have here. Does this kind of thing then make you think more globally about whether or not that movement that is spurring a lot of white nationalism, not just here, but around the world, is there something that can be done to counteract it?
Yeah. It's a great question. And just by the way, on the gun laws situation, the Prime Minister of New Zealand said they're going to tighten up their gun laws after one mass shooting. The first response is not thoughts and prayers, change our gun laws, a message perhaps to American politicians. But just on the white nationalism problem, it is on the rise. They are on the rise. Trump's talking nonsense when he says today they're not on the rise. Look across Western Europe, Eastern Europe, look down under Australia, New Zealand, look at the United States of America where you have an enabler of white nationalists in the White House. It's a real problem. And to pretend, and here's what you have to do about it, Joy, we have to be able to talk talk about the people who are mainstreaming it. It's very easy to say, the alt-right, the David Dukes, the Richard Spencers. Fine, it's very easy to attack them. Even Trump can attack them. Let's talk about what people in our industry, Joy, are doing. Mainstream journalists and commentators, pundits, the kind of hate speech and Islamophobia that they are trafficking in regularly on cable news, in national newspapers. You read that manifesto from this horrific individual in New Zealand, and a lot of that language is language you hear and see in newspapers, magazines, and on cable news. Who's going to call that out? It's very easy to call out Islamophobia on the day of a mass killing. Are we going to call out Islamophobia on the other 364 days of the year as well?
Yeah, it is a very important conversation to have. Thank you both for being here. Adam Serwer, Mehdi Hasan, thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.